The eyes have it. Here's your look at the Mattel Master Universe Origins Tri-Klops. Modernizing and celebrating the original 80s Master Universe action figures, Master Universe Origins gives you the power to pose Eternia's greatest warriors as retro-style figures, or in the new, action-packed battle positions. Before we get a closer look at Tri-Klops, the first thing we're going to want to do is figure out how tall the figure stands. Do you know what Tri-Klops and Bikini have in common? They both have 3 eyes. Get your mind out of the gutter. We're going to take the tape measure right to the very top of his head. Going to stop it right there, Bikini and Tri-Klops. The figure stands 5.8 inches in height. Switching that over to centimeters, the figure is 14.9 or about 15 centimeters tall. Of course, pretty much samesies when it comes to the bodies that they use for these figures, but to give you some comparisons, let's bring in Skeletor, the guy's boss. Doesn't really pay well in benefits, but occasionally he gets the free lunch, so who's really going to complain? We can also bring in Trapjaw. Let's also bring in Beastman. Some of the other figures we can also add, let's bring in Merman. And why not? We'll also bring in Evil Lyn, because she's got evil in her name. Kind of gives you a good idea, short of Evil Lyn, who's using, of course, a different body. They're all pretty much, like I said, using the same body with slightly different tooling, maybe. Like Beastman, for example, it's got the furry arms and torso. I didn't want to draw too much attention to it, Beastman, but I mean, it stands out like a sore thumb. You're very hairy, both in the arms and chest area. Short of the figure's sword, he comes included with your standard offerings. Did you just call it a sword? I did call it a sword. He comes also included with instructions. Unnecessarily printed instructions, if you ask me, but it's to the new novice collector of this line to tell you, novice collector, that you can remove the arms, you can remove the lower furry boots, the head, and the furry underoos. By removing it, it's not to indicate that you will want to be yanking off the legs. No, you don't want to do that. But this is just to tell you that you can yank this off from the top torso. So you have the top half, the bottom half, and then all the things marked in gray that you can remove as well. I just don't get it. I don't know why they have to include this. But they did include at least a mini comic. I appreciate that, at least. The Master Universe mini comic, the same, in fact, same one that came included with Hordak, comes also included with Tri-Klops. On the front, you don't see Tri-Klops, but you see a rather nice illustrated image of Ninjor. Really looking forward to getting him opened up and reviewed. Let's have a look quickly at the contents. Like I spent a whole lot of time because I thought I spent too much time when we looked at it for Hordak. But yeah, there's no dialogue. Nowhere. What the comic joke is down below, I have no idea because there's nothing to read up on. And again, some really nice stellar artwork. One good thing, at least a saving grace, is if you lose, damage, or otherwise just destroy one of these comics, you at least have another few to grab from. I mean, because again, all of these figures from this comic, all this line is going to come included with the same comic. Okay. I'm going to put that to the side. Tri-Klops comes included with his sword. Why you keep calling it a sword? I don't know. It's just something to do. The sword itself seems to have been molded in green plastic, and I think what then it was differently painted was the actual handle, painted here in black. It's a nice looking sword. I'll stop calling it a sword. It does have the center eye on both sides. Unfortunately, it was just a little bit warped, taking it from its plastic prison, but I'm sure I just have to heat this up a little bit and straighten out the job, and then we'll be fine and good. It can, of course, fit into his hand. Options are limited, and you have a 50-50 guess, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's not this hand right here. Oh, I gave it away. Yeah, it actually fits into this hand right here. That's a nice looking sword. But you can also take the sword out of his hand, or flip the figure around, and there's a section on the back that holsters it as well, like that. I'm going to assume that the original vintage Tri-Klops had it in the same placement, because I mean, I would have almost even moved it further over here, so it wasn't off to the side. Just looks a little strange when you're seeing it from the front of the figure. If it was a little bit, like I said, further over, or dead center, or even just leaning off to the side where it's stuck out on both sides, I think would look a little bit better, but I got to imagine there's some method to their madness by where they decide to place it. You can also remove the armor piece if you want to altogether. It just involves removing the clasp, these little hooked pieces of plastic, unlooping that on both sides, and just removing this altogether. Essentially, what you would be getting underneath all this is just basically a He-Man body. Don't believe me? You really should start believing me. You can see that short of just the coloring of the furry underoos being a different color, he's pretty much using the same arms, the same belted area, and in fact, even the same boots. It brings us one step closer to getting a Wondar, that Wonder Bread exclusive. I mean, really, all you really would have to do is take the torso piece off, find the one that came included with Zodak, put that in place, and then if anything, maybe you just paint a He-Man head, and you've got yourself Wondar. Anyways, we're going to put that to the side. Of course, his one gimmick, he's Tri-Klops after all, tri meaning three, is he does have three individual eyes, with each eye having its own purpose, also its own color. Basically, all you do is just rotate the disc. It's a simple and yet so effective gimmick. I mean, it really doesn't have to get super elaborate. It's basically just a piece that sits on top of his head, plugged in place, and just allows you to rotate the eyes all the way around. I wouldn't quite put it in the same category as many faces, but it's kind of the same idea. There's just a different expression, being the fact that you can rotate it. I kind of like this eyeball, or I like this one. My least favorite is this eye right here. I don't know why. Just doesn't work as well for me. But the eyes definitely are nice painted pieces. You can see the eyeball has been painted. It's a little bit missed, unfortunately. There's a little bit of green that looks like right at the top there. That's a small little nitpick. Also got a little bit of plastic on the very end of it. Am I picking this part too much? I hope not, because it really is a nice looking figure. It's got a little bit of hair sticking out from the bottom of his helmet as well. Now, like I said, this is basically all, this is just an appliance piece that goes over top of the torso. Once you really remove that, you're removing all the things that make Tri-Klops, short of, again, his helmet. The rest of his body really isn't a lot to be spent. I don't feel like we have to spend a lot of time talking about the bodies, because the bodies are basically your stock bodies that they're using for all the Master Universe figures. I do like the dark coloring of the furry underoos, as well as does match the lower furry boots. But again, like under all of this is you're basically just getting your stock He-Man body. For the articulation though, actually one thing I do want to talk about is his head. I know I spent a little bit of time talking about the disc of three eyes that rotate. Let's go back to that one. The expression on his face is good. Looks like he's suffering from something that we're not aware of. Unfortunately with his head, that's one thing I actually just reminded myself of it. He's got a real noticeable gap underneath it. I mean, obviously, if you're going to see it from the top here, you're not going to notice it. You're probably not even going to point it out to any of your friends that are coming over to see these figures. But there's a big gap underneath his chin, right there. I mean, one good thing now, segueing over to the articulation on the figure, is it does mean there's a lot more generosity when it comes to moving the head up and down. Of course, you still have it rocking back and forth, and you can rotate it. While you are rotating it, you're obviously going to start rotating the disc. It's just one of those cases. You can kind of grab it from lower down below, but I mean, obviously this rotating is not going to hurt anybody. It may hurt Tri-Klops doing it too frequently, but certainly not going to hurt you as you're doing that with the figure. As for the arms hinge out. They bring out at a comfortable 90-degree angle bend. You can also bring the arms all the way around. A little tight, I will say, on the one arm here. This other arm isn't as tight, but I certainly would appreciate tighter joints on figures than excessively loose. And I've had a couple of Master Universe Origin figures that have had really loose joints. The elbows do hinge. You can see there's the hinge joint right there that allows the arms to bend back and forth. And you can also rotate them back and forth as well. They can do that. They can do that. The hands rotate also back and forth. You can hinge them this way as well. It's just straight waist swivel, nothing overly complicated there. You can bring the legs out. You can bring them forward and back. It does have the bend at the knee. I'll rush through this quickly. You can also bend the legs if you want to have them more in their vintage look. It basically just involves you bending the knee like this, bringing the legs forward. I have noticed though, I mean, just putting them in a pose like this, that there's a lot of friction when you want to bring the legs forward. I mean, to this point right here, there's a lot of resistance happening, but at least it gives you his vintage kind of crouched pose if you want to go that look. Personally, for me, I like to always just straighten out the legs. Proportionally, it makes them look a little bit better. And again, if you're going to have the articulation in the knees, I really don't want to start adding stress to those knees by bending them if I don't have to. Because after all, I will want to have the figures just standing straight like this. He does also have the articulation, just more so by the way that the boots are attached. They swivel all the way around. You can hinge them up and down this way. And he does also have the ankle pivot. Very nice. Nice looking figure. It's a good solid wave, really, when you think about it. When we had a look at Hordak, I drew a blank as to try to think of the other one. It was Stratos. Stratos makes up this wave. Along with, of course, Tri-Klops, Ninjor, Hordak, and of course thrown in there as well as He-Man and Skeletor. Tri-Klops is one of those figures that I think if you are collecting the Masters of the Universe Origins line, I mean, he is one of those top tier villains, the ones that you always saw in the original Filmation cartoon. For that reason, and that reason alone, I think it's one of those must pick-ups if, again, you are collecting the Masters of the Universe Origins line. You know, I'm kind of actually surprised that Tri-Klops didn't arrive in the first wave. I was kind of considering him to be like a first wave released figure. Still, despite that, I'm happy to see that we finally have Tri-Klops that can join along with the rest of Skeletor's cronies. Growing up and watching the Filmation cartoon, Tri-Klops sat pretty high for me. It was kind of like Skeletor, then Beastman, Tri-Klops, Trapjaw. A little bit lower below that, still Merman, but he arrived at least for the company's lunch. Tri-Klops looks really good, like his vintage counterpart, and still includes that same vintage-inspired sword. It sits, granted, a little bit too off to the side for my liking. I would have probably centered that a little bit more so, but maybe that's what the original vintage toy had. So, of course, Mattel just followed suit when it came to the Origins release. He has still that original spinning gimmick when it comes to rotating his eyes. 3 eyes to choose from. But I kind of have my personal favorite, similar to many faces. I'd never really display him with a monster face, and nor would I display the Visine eye Tri-Klops. Just wouldn't do that. It's either this eye or it's the blue eye, and I'm going to settle between those two. Sorry, Visine eye, you're not going to get included. A nice posable figure, but pretty much the same posability as all the other Master Universe Origins figure line. Tri-Klops is a well-welcomed addition to my collection. Did you guys manage to pick up Tri-Klops yet? I know still availability. I mean, we can talk about the elephant in the room. The availability on this line isn't the greatest. You either flourish and can go to your local stores and they're all over the place, or you can be like me and you can go to your local stores and they have nothing. No, that's not true. That's not true. We have Zodak and we have Roboto. That's it. Just a whole lot of Robotos. Nobody's giving any love to Roboto. But none of this line I've been able to find locally and end up having to order them online. So, of course, because I ordered the entire wave, we are going to be still looking at Ninjor and Stratos. Not really sure which one I want to look at first. I like Stratos because I had Stratos as a kid, but man, that Ninjor looks pretty sweet. If you are enjoying the content that you're seeing on this channel, think it's pretty freaking sweet. Thank you for that vote of confidence. Make sure that if you haven't already, that you've subscribed to this channel and that you've turned the bell notification on. I've tipped my hat early, I know, to tell you that, yes, in fact, we are going to be looking at Stratos, and we are going to be looking at Ninjor. He-Man and Skeletor that were also included in this wave, I've already reviewed them. I might maybe pick up another couple of them, maybe one more He-Man, one more Skeletor, and kind of just keep them sealed in packaging, because as reviewing these, I've unfortunately had to open up all of these, because I really did want to have them loose and on display anyways, but I think there are going to be a couple of the Master Universe Origins figures that I will want to keep still in their plastic prisons, and keep them on display on a shelf or on my wall. But what do you think of this line, and what is your availability? Not your availability like we're going to be getting together going for a movie, but what's the availability on this figure line in your local area? Let me know down below in the comments section. Lots of stuff coming your way, guys. So as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.